Hello, everybody. My name is David Wallis. You may know me as the Breakthrough Coach. I'm delighted to be hosted by Prosper today on the Prosperity Show. And I'm sure that Prosper is going to ask me about my journey, my story. He's going to ask me about bravery. He's going to ask me also what actions I've been taking. So I'm very happy to share that with you in the spirit of breaking through and helping everybody make progress. Thank you very much, Prosper, for the invitation.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Online Prosperity Show. I'm your host, Prosper Taruvinga, and today we've got a special guest who's known for shaking things up, pushing beyond boundaries, and unlocking potential. Now, David, how are you doing today?
Actually, well, it's 6 o'clock just gone in the UK in the morning, so I'm bright and breezy, ready to go, and looking forward to having a chat with you. So thank you.
Absolutely. Don't you just love the time difference? It's like we're tagging each other. I'm about to jump off now and you're only just getting started with your day. You know what we should do, David?
Sort of have a brunch, an online brunch together.
That's easy. You know, we should actually, I would look up in your area the lottery numbers that would have played throughout the day. And then I will send you a message with those numbers, but we split 60-40. 60 my way and 40 your way, because I discovered the numbers and I came up with the idea. What do you think about that?
Well, I would say 50-50 or 40-60 the other way, on the basis that you need a partner in crime to be able to do that. So good idea. Actually, if it's outside of the legal parameters, I would not probably play. If it's inside the rules, then I would. But yeah, I like the creativity and the innovation. So,
well, you just heard the breakthrough coach himself giving me a bit of coaching right there on what is and what should not be. So as you can tell, David is no ordinary coach. He's a powerhouse in empowering professionals to transcend their limitations and realize their true potential. Now, he comes with over a decade in coaching, mentoring, and training. And David has helped thousands redefine success by mastering crucial skills such as strategic thinking, negotiation, and resilience. As you have heard, he's negotiated his stake in the in the spoils that we're gonna get. I was offering him 60 percent, but he twisted my arm to go to the 50% mark. So you can only imagine when he starts helping you negotiate your life and everything else that comes along with it. But here's a twist for those that are watching right now. David wasn't always on this path. I mean, after a transformative, was it 34 years, David, in your career in banking and finance?
Yeah, 34 years in global banking, in retail, commercial, corporate, asset management, offshore banking. Several people in my sort of friend circle would call me institutionalized.
Wow, 34 years. Yes, with, like he says, institutionalized and organizational changes actually pushed him to take a leap of faith. He actually negotiated his departure with no clear next step, but a strong desire to help others. And what then followed was an entrepreneurial journey full of challenges, breakthroughs, and countless lessons. And today we're going to be peeling back the layers of David's journey, how he went from that corporate stability to forging a success path in his own terms. So I encourage you to stay tuned and discover not only David's techniques and methods, but also the invisible lessons that might actually just spark the change in your life and in your business. Now, I could go on and on talking about this remarkable man, but it defeats the whole purpose of having him on the show. Now, David, tell us a little bit about the early days in banking and finance, especially, those 34 years. What was it like?
Well, I think, on reflection, and it is now on reflection 12 years after I sort of ended corporate life, what you realize is corporate life, and certainly working for a global bank, gives you a lot of structure, a lot of process, a lot of systems that in a way, you don't realize you have them, whilst you're acquiring them. You learn about the ability to ask questions. You learn about the ability to actually develop relationships with individuals. You understand where your place is and what needs to be done. You understand what your priorities are. However, actually, for me as an individual, I quite often felt like an entrepreneur within a bank, what we'd call an intrapreneur, somebody with ideas, somebody thinking outside of the box, somebody wanting to, make an impact. In a way, that actually is quite difficult when there are a set of rules and procedures to follow. So that creativity and innovation, that existed before I became an entrepreneur in terms of product, service, ways of organizing. For example, I was one of the first people to play music in the banking hall, for clients, not because actually I was trying to entertain them. I was trying to actually sort of keep them happy while they were queuing for their cash. So it just seemed quite sensible to give them something else to concentrate on. And that idea was adopted, and we saw that in banks around the world. I'm not saying that's my idea, but that was just something that was creative, a thought process, but it was outside of the box. If you go back to 1970s, 1980s banking, that was something you would have never saw and never thought. So all the time in banking, I was developing those skills. Those skills were definitely applicable in an entrepreneurial sense. You just have to actually sort of jump out of the plane, let the parachute take you, and you have to think about what you're going to do when you do hit the ground, which is, how are you going to run your own business? What are you going to do?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for taking us on that journey. Now, obviously, a question arises from all of that. 34 years is a lifetime that somebody would have dedicated to a profession or a job or things of that nature. Was this a childhood dream, or was it something that you came across, as you were on your journey towards becoming?
Well, I think as a 17 or 18-year-old, I went for a sort of test of skills to give me some assistance in terms of, what I should do for a career. My father was an engineer. He encouraged me physics, chemistry, biology, etc. I was more like history, English, economics. I liked all of those things. So there was a sort of a debate as to what would be the best type of career. In the end, that sort of skills study showed me that I should be working in an office with people and actually looking for a leadership role. That was identified at the age of 18. And really, that's where I went. I went to where I could work with people, influence people, actually perform better than other people, and make my mark actually sort of doing things which were easier for me, that play to my strengths, if you were. Personality, willingness to chat, willingness to engage, willingness to get outside of the comfort zone, etc. And I don't think they're necessarily skills you acquire. Some of those skills are there naturally, and you have to make the most of them.
Absolutely. And obviously, you're painting a picture of having parents that would have been in roles that are obviously respectable in in society anywhere in the world. Was it an expectation that you also have to, no matter what your skill set was, but was it like an expectation for you to actually have or come up with a career like this?
I'm not sure my parents had an expectation. I think they had an expectation that I would become successful. They had an expectation that I would work hard. I think the choice was left down to me, from my father. My father actually was an engineer on the Queen Elizabeth II. There's sort of ocean liners, sailing from Southampton to the US. So what I sort of saw and heard was my father traveled. My father went outside of a comfort zone. My father put himself in a position where he was away from his family, for a week, 3 weeks, 6 weeks at a time. And that willingness to be brave and to explore, that always appealed to me. When he came home with a sort of US 10-gallon hat, or, American Toys Barney Rubble, something like that, which was very American to us. There was always this idea that there was something out there in the world that was bigger than what we were doing. And I think I took that on. Expectation wise, I went into banking. My three younger brothers followed me into banking. So if there was an expectation, we sort of broke through and changed my parents' expectations about what the future might look like.
And the brothers, they're still involved in the banking sector, or did they?
We're a family of finance. So my next brother's a wealth manager. One brother is a sort of a corporate manager working with commercial clients, and the other manager, the other one is actually also a branch manager as well.
Absolutely. So in this 34 years, were you with one particular bank, or did you move around and there was a bit of change that was happening there?
Well, I joined a bank which was acquired by another bank, but I always refer to them as the same bank because they're the people. My staff number stayed the same. The title above the door changed. The difference was it was a regional bank to a global bank on acquisition. So that career really is one bank, the way I look at it, but it's 7 different disciplines within that bank, which is unusual. Quite often in the bank, you join the retail bank and you stay with retail. So I spent a little time in retail, thought I wanted to go and do something else. My first management appointment was as a trainer. And the reason I wanted to be a trainer was to get that confidence to stand in front of an audience, to be able to stand up, to be able to present. So I went somewhere where it was, less comfortable for me. And then somebody said, actually, retail's easy. So I looked for a job in corporate and commercial banking. And then I looked for a job in asset management, and then I looked for a job in offshore, and then I looked for a job internationally. So the journey was always 3 to 5 years, and then look for something which was more challenging.
Absolutely. And obviously, thank you so much for, shedding light to what the journey was like. And, obviously with the innovation that you were bringing to this space, like you said, bringing music to a bank. I'm from Zimbabwe, where obviously the floors in the bank were not even carpet; they were like hard floor concrete. And by the time I grew up, people had a metal ID, which was made out of aluminium, so that even if you got involved in an accident or burnt or whatever it is, they would like a dog tag, but it was made out of aluminium, and it would last long.
Right.
And my memory of a bank, David, is that metal aluminium hitting the hard floor. And that's like scary, because everybody's quiet, they're just going in for whatever they're going in. And that, breaking of that noise, everybody will start looking at who done that and stuff like that. So I can only imagine if music was playing in there, people would be less tense. So I wish that had come to my bank when I was growing up.
Well, I remember a really early story when I was a junior in the bank, and we always had lots of people in the queue dropping stuff, but actually you're quite right. It was very respectful, very silent. So as a youngster, I thought, well, this is awful. This is terrible. This doesn't feel like life at all. So I used to go out into the banking hall and literally stand in the queue and chat to the clients or to the customers. And my boss would say, well, what are you doing? What are you doing? I'm just trying to keep them happy. He said, get back here and count money. Get back here and count money. But it was a very early idea that actually you needed to do something to enhance the customer experience. So, those words didn't exist together at that time. But intuitively, I think, like you're smiling now about your memory, that it was very formal, very quiet, very reverential.
Yeah.
I just didn't think that was symptomatic or representative of what life was like.
Absolutely, because people had to make an appointment to go to the bank, or dress up in their Sunday best, showing up into the bank. And yeah, it always used to baffle me how that was. And also humor me. You were working in customer care in the bank. What is it about the bank that you have to follow those zigzag lines all the way, even if no one is in there? You just have to you go all the way there and you come back and you keep telling them, I'm on my way, and then you keep going like that. As a kid, I'll just rush through, and you can imagine how the yelling or even the beating from the mom, you don't do that, go through the zigzags,
I always think that that was a sense of what I call Britishness, a sense that actually when you took your place in the queue, you had to be served in order. That's something I never understood. Part of my career, I literally was a cashier, and we had sort of 5, 6, 7 tills open at the same time. Customers used to work out who was the fastest cashier. So they used to, maybe have a long queue at one cashier and a short queue at another. But actually, the trick was they wanted to be handled, or they wanted to interact with a cashier they enjoyed speaking with. That was the trick. And if you could speak and count, you were in. You would count more money and serve more customers. You might understand that was me. I would socialize. I would remember what they did at the weekend. I would ask them questions. I would count their money. The important thing, of course, count the money right in and make sure they get the right money back.
Absolutely. So what happened then? What was the tipping point for you? Was there a particular moment or conversation that made you realize it was time to step into something new?
Yeah, well, so I guess in the mid-1990s, actually a friend of mine who's now living in Melbourne, where you live, still in banking and very partial to...
In the real Australia.
In the real Australia. Fair enough. Okay, I'll make a note of that. In the real Australia, Melbourne. So Leicester actually and others sent me away on a course, sort of a talent course for managers. And the organization that was handling that actually sort of ran a profile for everybody. And then he walked into the middle of the room, placed that profile on a flip chart. That flip chart, they started to fill the names of the individuals in. And I was thinking, okay, so where's my name? And there were roughly 30 people in the room. You got to 28, 29, and my name still didn't appear on the flip chart. And then Michael, who was running the workshop, said, okay, Dave, now you. So now we can't quite fit you onto this flip chart because we don't really understand you. In fact, we can't necessarily put you close to the flip chart because you're different. In fact, as I'm walking, and he started walking out of the room, he walked out of the room and shouted, you're sort of out here somewhere, like a long way from the center in terms of ideas, creativity, innovation. And the phrase he used was, out here, we regard this territory as mad and dangerous. And his point was that actually when he came back into the room and said, what we need is people like you at the center, and you have to learn to work in the center for those mad and dangerous ideas to become a reality. But the important thing is we need you. And for me, that was a mark. I thought that was a good thing. I was sitting there thinking, oh, right, okay. So I have got something that somebody else doesn't have. How do I now use it?
So it's obviously conversations like that where people don't quite understand you and they want you to conform to a certain way of being that, follows whatever protocol or mandates that the bank would have stipulated. I mean, just so that you a cog in whatever machine that they're trying to build. And if they can't manage you, then they would try and maybe smoke you out somehow.
I don't think it was about necessarily smoking me out or actually sort of making me feel that I wasn't welcome. It was actually, if you like, it's widgets fit here, 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 and here. And you've got this person who wants a portfolio career. So this person wants to work in retail, but wants to work in commercial, wants to work in corporate, wants to work in asset management, wants to go abroad. This was not the normal profile. This person is also creative, innovative, and prepared to get outside of their comfort zone. Whereas 80%, 90% of my colleagues happy to follow the trodden path because it's safe, it's secure, it has all of those advantages that you look for in a career. For me, it was about finding things which are sort of on the edge. It's things that were different. For example, taking up a posting in a country where they don't speak your language.
Now, David, I mean, obviously, the things that people really work for is to be able to buy a house, to be able to buy a car, and maybe to be able to go on a holiday, once in a while or things of that nature. Now, all of these things are facilitated by a bank. And I can only assume that if you're working within the bank, you would know what buttons to press for you to have a mortgage spit out on the other end, or what button to press to have a car loan spit out on the other end. So I think maybe that's the reason why, because other people were just content with those trappings, and eventually, they didn't have to over expand themselves. And would that be the reason why whenever you go to a bank, a lot of people just tell you, why don't you use the app? You can get this on the app. You can change your address on the app. What are they there for?
Well, I think actually you're quite right. Their intuition tells you that the bank is system and process driven, which I still think is an advantage. However, banking's all about people, banking's all about experience, and therefore the connection, when you lose that, and I think many banks now have lost that completely. I walk into my local bank and I might be the only person there. And actually there are maybe 3 or 4 people in the room who are capable of serving. If they say to me, we'll use the app, to me, that's an abdication of responsibility to actually enhance the customer experience. So I was once told by a senior manager that sometimes the needle pushes too far. The pendulum needs to settle in the middle where you actually sort of manage those things. And quite often it goes too far to the right, too far to the left, and society brings it sort of back into its norm. So for me, banking, I went into banking because it involved people. The moment it actually diverged from that, actually, when we, for example, we had sort of a set of values. When those values for me were compromised, and I felt that my values were higher than the values of the business or the values of the team, that was the point in which I decided to leave. And say, well, okay, enough's enough. Here's a career. My thought process was actually, what could I do on the outside? Most of my peers and colleagues would not jump, would not go. My view was, okay, I'm still young enough to have a second phase of my career. Why not? Let's go and have a look.
And obviously, leaving a long-standing career like that must have been really daunting. I mean, what were some of the fears or maybe obstacles that you would have faced along the way, and what was the first thought that came into your head? What am I going to do? Was that to look for another job, or were you going to sue, or were you going to...
No. No, the departing from the bank was actually sort of, a sort of mutual decision. I was asked to do something. It was not something I wanted to do. There were sort of some issues around paperwork, etc., in terms of going to work in another country. But actually, in the back of my mind, somebody gave me a bit of advice. If you get a chance to get a negotiated departure and do something else, I would advise you to do that. So I took that opportunity the first time it became available to me. Actually, we spoke with my wife and my 2 children. We created something called Project Disney. If you dream it, you can do it. So that really became our sort of, backdrop. I cannot say to you that I was fearful of the future. At that point in 2012, I had no idea what it was that I was going to do. But the reality was I trusted myself to do something. This goes back to a bit of advice my father gave me: do something, do anything, but don't do nothing.
I like that. Because at the end of the day, if you stop riding a bicycle, it stops and you fall. And that's just how life, works. But, your family would have been used to you being in the banking sector for 34 years. They probably were just going to think you were going to walk out with a golden watch, just like everybody else does. And, but you, like you said, you guys came up with Project Disney, which means they would have supported you. Were there other people that you were probably learning from, during this transition? Because it's not easy. You sometimes start really questioning your own existence and your own value and, who you are and things of that nature. Was there anyone that came to the rescue to help you shape your journey?
Well, I would say the answer to that is a portfolio of people, coaches, mentors, formally or informally. I remember being in Warsaw discussing with my coach at the time, what the future might hold. He said, well, you have all of the ideas, all of the structure, all of the systems, all the support. You can make the future whatever you want to make it. That person trusted me. Informal mentors and coaches around me, they also felt the same. If anybody can survive external after 34 years of training, it would be you. My family said, we trust you, which is a big vote of confidence. In fairness, I had secured their income for 2 years. So it wasn't as if we were jumping without a parachute. The parachute was fully active. We were going to land. There was sort of a plan. In terms of what would happen, I've always worked in 90-day slugs of time. So in the first 90 days, I'll think about what we can do. In the second 90 days, I'll start to form that. In the third 90 days, the plan will be visible. But by the end of the year, we will be active on the plan. And Prosper, that's exactly what I do now. If you ask me what I'm doing in this 90 days, it's already set. If you ask me what I'm changing, I have an idea what that may be. But that internal discussion with myself and my family will take place in January.
Now let's go to that first 90 days when you jumped out and you're like, yeah, I'm an entrepreneur now, not an intrapreneur that you were before. Graduated a little bit and you stepped out into entrepreneurship. What were some of the biggest surprises or challenges that you encountered that you hadn't anticipated? Because I wouldn't think you'd be able to just start playing music for people, on the street, or just reach out to people and just start having a conversation like you would in the bank, because that's different. Yeah.
Well, I had this idea that I wanted to be a coach and a trainer, a facilitator, something around that. I think in a way, you asked me about my childhood dream. I sort of imagined it actually as part of my career, I would be a teacher, a professor, a facilitator. And actually, when I reached the sort of age of 55, 60, that I would be a professor at a university talking to people about my experience. So in the back of my mind, there was this sort of idea that I would be communicating with others and sharing experience. So when we actually left Poland, Warsaw, and went for that sort of first 2 to 3 years to Lisbon, Portugal, we created an environment where we would do something different. It was completely, different to what we'd done before, living on a golf course. And there I started to actually sort of revisit coaching qualifications. And actually, I was a reasonable golfer, a single figure handicap golfer. So I started playing golf and I started to coach the mindset of the young golfers at the golf club free of charge. So I started playing golf with people that were better than me. And I started giving them advice and guidance about what type of shot they should hit, how they should prepare, what their diet looked like, what was their discipline on the course, how they carried themselves. So for a little while, I started to practice the skills in an informal setting to see how it would land with those individuals in a sporting environment, something I could enjoy, something that they could enjoy, very little risk. That reaffirmed the willingness to become a coach, mentor, facilitator, a sharer of knowledge and experience.
Talking about facilitation and, just going by the cuff, off the cuff, rumor has it that you'd actually presented to an audience in Poland, or was it the Polish language, when you only had 12 weeks to prepare? What was going on in this particular incident, and how did it impact your outlook towards tackling challenges?
Well, I think actually sort of bravery is a word that's going to be associated with me. I'm sure my children would use that when they talk about me. Willingness to do things which, on the face of it, seem challenging or almost impossible. And I very much remember appearing in the boardroom as part of the executive team, actually in the Polish community, trying to build a bank. And one of my Polish colleagues said, you know what the trouble with you guys is? You never make you never try to speak in our language. You never try to do anything in our language. So I turned to Pavel, who was sitting to my left, and I said, Pavel, when I do my first presentation to a group, I will deliver it in Polish. Unfortunately, Prosper, the words were out before I could take them back. So, Pavel looked at me, he said to me, but it's the third most difficult language to learn in the world. So, I went home, told my wife, and the first thing we need to do is get a language coach. The second thing we need to do is actually take advantage of the fact that I've got a good memory, so I can learn things parrot fashion. I can mimic. So in those 12 weeks, which was the time before my first presentation, I had a language coach. I had a script written for me. I practiced it. When I was in public, people would ask me if I spoke Polish. Moja zabawka jest zepsuta means my toys are broken. So I learned certain phrases that would actually be a conversation starter. And I learned phrases that would allow me to introduce my family, etc., etc. And in 12 weeks, I made my first public presentation to the broader team in Polish. And I got a round of applause for that. But what I was trying to do is trying to challenge their perception that we were not willing to do anything. So on behalf of all of the expats around the world, I was saying, we are prepared to try and speak your language because you're speaking ours. And I felt that was just fair, because the stereotypical English person goes anywhere in the world and expects to be understood in English.
Absolutely. And was that recorded? Because that would be a bit funny to watch. What did you say? Yak shamash, dobshare.
Yeah. Well, all of those things, how are you? Barzo, dobshare, miegu, we can do all of those things. I mean, I'm 12 years on, and actually, I still have some phrases. But interestingly enough, like on my LinkedIn following, when I'm launching anything like the Breakthrough Coach or like Capella Academy, actually 43% of my audience actually comments. They're from Poland. So I have a fairly large following, a fairly loyal audience there. And actually quite a few of my clients are in Central Eastern Europe as well.
Absolutely. So you've carved out your own niche right there. And obviously you're making a difference to these people because you obviously dared to learn their language and things of that nature. So congratulations. Now, you did mention coaching and mentoring all in the same sort of breath. Now, these are vast fields. What actually makes your approach different, given you were working in the banking sector and corporate, and maybe you'd have had some learnings there, but what is it that differentiates you from any other coach out there, and how do you ensure that it resonates and actually gets the results for your clients across different industries?
Well, interestingly enough, I had this conversation yesterday with two clients. So around about this time yesterday morning, I was taking part in two, catch-up meetings. The thing that always struck me here was accountability. Those individuals that I spoke to yesterday, they actually booked their calls with me because they want to report back to me what they have done. So we go back to that idea of do something, do anything, but don't do nothing. That's really sort of the central tenet. If you tell me you have a problem with customer experience, then talk to some customers and find out what it is you need to change, and then come back and tell me what you're doing about it. And it's all about the actions that they're agreeing to take. So I have a client based in Edmonton, Canada, who, when we started working together, his major dream was to run a marathon. He thought he was 2 years away from that. He signed up to do the marathon to get it done. Halfway through that marathon, he thought about giving up. But the worst thing about giving up for him was he would have to phone me and tell me that he'd given up. And that was not something he was willing to do. So, quite early on with Aaron, I knew straight away that actually there was something that was, maybe I was on their shoulder. A few of my customers or clients, they use the term, what would Dave do in this situation? They literally use that phrase back to me. So I think in a way I'm with them. I feel that I'm on their shoulder, taking care of them. I refer to them as sort of my talent pool, my family. And the truth is, I celebrate their successes more than I celebrate my own. But it's all about accountability. Are they prepared to take action to address their concerns, to address their challenge? Are they prepared to be brave and get outside of their comfort zone and do something which will allow them to progress, develop, become a success? And in a way, maybe I provide the inspiration. You can hear my father is still an inspiration to me. He's no longer with us. He's sort of up there. Picture of him behind my screen. Do something, do anything, actually, but don't do nothing.
Absolutely. And those are like some words to really live by. I've actually written them down. And I quite like, the relationship that you have with, your clients, because so many people don't have people that believe in them. So many people don't have people that, would see who they possibly can become. And if they now have this mantra of do something, do anything, just don't do nothing, and also have that whole what would Dave do, all those three things will automatically get them to snap out of a decision to maybe quit or stop doing whatever it is that they were
Yeah.
doing. And I think those are really powerful tools. And not only that, you also work extensively on soft skills, with people like I did mention earlier on negotiation, persuasion, and resilience. Why do you believe these skills are so critical in today's business world?
Well, in fairness, I sort of look at the things that I had to actually challenge. If somebody closes your business, I mean, several times in my career, corporate wise, the division or the department was closed. Not our fault, not our problem, but we have got to go and do something else. We've got to do a new role. We've got to go and sit down with individuals who are about to lose their job or be repositioned or be reallocated somewhere else. You have to develop resilience in that situation. I once was part of a downsizing. We were, closing some branches, closing parts of the region. We had to select people for redundancy. And my boss said, okay, we'll do this together. And I said, well, that's great. And actually, at the time, I was too junior. They had to get a special disposition for me to do that. But they felt that I was the best person to do it. What I found out later was that he was in the room giving promotions and I was in the other room actually making people redundant. At the end of that week, you have to find resilience to go again because you haven't changed as a person. Your resilience is you do the job professionally, you do it well with the people in mind, but the next week you've got to come back and you've got to be professional and get your job done and move forward. So resilience, soft skills, being able to negotiate, being able to persuade people to your point of view, these skills just don't come out of thin air. They have to practice. They're part of structure. They're part of process. Mm-hmm. You have to stop. You have to think. You have to understand your outcome. You have to have a plan of attack. In a way, the bank gave me that, and I've taken that a step further by sharing it with others.
Absolutely. And I recently believe in life, we're here to live, to learn, and to contribute. For you to be able to live your best life, you need to learn, the systems, processes, and tools that will enable you to do that. And once that's done, you need to be able to then contribute to others. And I believe this is exactly what you have done, and made it so much that now you're sending the elevator down to help those that are on their way up. And kudos to you for choosing to help other people do and have a happier existence. Now, in this day and age, we were just talking about what happened in the last sort of 5 years where the world came to a standstill. And if you lived in Melbourne, we literally wrote the blueprint on how to be the most locked down city in the world. Yet during that time, so many people were being told, albeit, indirectly, that what they actually do is not needed in the world. Because if somebody tells you your work is non-essential, you don't necessarily need to go to work. That must tell you a thing or two about the actual use case of what you're doing in the world. So many people are now going back to those jobs that nobody needed, and they're sort of going at it with mixed feelings, no longer knowing whether what they do is actually a purpose or is it just a means to an end. What sort of advice would you give to someone who is maybe contemplating a major career shift, but is also feeling held back by uncertainty?
Well, I think actually probably the thing that holds people back is fear of change and actually sort of concern about, in fact, one of my clients last week said to me, I feel as though I'm on autopilot And I asked them to explain to me. They said, "Well, actually, I realise that now I've sort of become safe. I've become risk averse. I'm relying upon what I have, and yet the skills of that individual were they're very translatable into a sort of an online sort of forum." So when I asked him to actually think about the skills that he had, he started to identify that for himself. But my question to him was actually, if you're on autopilot, who's really in control? You're sort of giving yourself a cup of tea or whatever. You're sitting back and you're going to arrive at a destination, but are you going to arrive at the destination of choice? So look at your strengths, look at what you can do, look at the environment you're in. How could you bring those strengths to a wider audience? And then do more of what you enjoy and less of what actually worries you and keeps you awake at night.
Absolutely. And if people are already sort of keen on embarking on this journey with you, what would be the best way that people can get a hold of you, David?
Well, actually, you can get a hold of me on LinkedIn. You sort of find me under my own name. You'll actually sort of hear from me as the Breakthrough Coach. We are launching Capella Academy, which you can follow as well on LinkedIn. But my sort of mail address, David, dwcoachconsult.com. You can get in touch with me by direct mail or mail. And normally we do like a 30-minute conversation to sort of work out whether there is something we can do together. But you can just follow and like my material. There's a lot of free material out there that will help. For example, there's an article going out this morning on transparency and trust. Do you have a right to be trusted if you're not transparent? These are all sort of thought leaders that allow you to think, well, okay, maybe I need to do a bit more. So it's not my objective to actually sort of rule the world here. My objective is to help and give back. So actually, when people want to connect with me at their own pace, at their own time, I'm happy to hear from anybody.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for allowing us access to that. But David, you've been doing this for what, 12 years now? There's got to be something that is obviously keeping you going and, edging you on, some sort of I don't know, a reward or, just helping other people. Obviously, what are you getting out of this? I mean, if you reflect on your journey, what's been the most rewarding outcome or achievement, and how has that actually influenced your daily routine?
Listen, I spent nearly 10 years facilitating classes around the world on sort of major subjects like strategy, project management. At the end of each of those workshops, I made the point that on a Friday evening at 8 o'clock, I'm going to raise a glass of wine as a toast to all of the people that I've worked with this week. I can honestly tell you, and I know some people won't believe me, but actually my reward is the success of others. I often say I live vicariously through the achievements of other individuals. That is the bit that actually makes me smile. I look at my children and I look at their achievements. I look at what my wife is doing, how they're actually sort of, being successful. I'm very, very fortunate to have a network and a group of individuals that are very successful, that are actually making their way in the world, that are looking and taking care of their families. You can see that look on my face. That's what I'm smiling about. That is the reward. Honestly, I don't need to. I don't need to win the golf tournament. But if my protege, if my client goes and wins the golf tournament, that's more important to me than me winning the golf tournament.
Now, David, you've actually embodied Zig Ziglar's statement: help enough people get what they want, then you will get that which you want. And it's just remarkable and beautiful to watch, when words come to life personified in, people that are living their lives like you are. So thank you so much for just about everything else you shared with us today and everything else. But, speaking of people that have said famous things and they were famous themselves, Steve Jobs mentioned the words, you cannot connect the dots looking forwards, but you can only connect the dots looking backwards. When we started this episode, you introduced us to this young boy who was looking at his dad going yonder, traveling to lands far and wide. And you've just replicated that. I mean, you're speaking to somebody in Australia right now. You don't necessarily need to do all of that these days. If you would maybe by any chance get a chance to sit down with your younger self, maybe before you started this career in banking and things of that nature, what sort of advice would you give to him, considering he was given career advice by other people?
Really good question. And I haven't been asked that question for quite a long time, so now I'm having to think about that. But I guess actually, for me, be braver and sooner.
Because yeah, wow. Because so many
Yes.
people waste a lot of time waiting and waiting for the right opportunity, and it's never going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd like, as a 17 or 18-year-old, I'd like a bit of reassurance now. So it might be braver sooner, but trust yourself.
And while you're at it, do something, do anything, just don't do nothing.
Yeah, well, that's my father. So he's sort of up there looking down, going, "Well done, you remembered."
Fantastic. I think you're also imparting that legacy with so many people that get an opportunity to be in your space. But yeah, we've come full circle. I mean, we've met that young guy, but what's next? What's in store, that people can expect from the breakthrough coach himself?
Well, for me, actually, the third phase of my, I've talked about first phase, second phase. The third phase of my career is that actually, because of COVID, because of all of the things that have happened in our background, I imagine I would be, a professor lecturing at a school. So I've decided that's not going to happen easily. So I'll create my own online school. So in partnership with my wife, we've invented something called Capella Academy. It's a school of soft skills and well-being. And actually, it will be live. It is live now in its prototype format. So during 2025, we'll be delivering soft skills training, well-being training to individuals, which is broken down into modular sort of 15, 20-minute sort of episodes where individuals can learn at their own pace, some free content, some paid for content. And I'm going to be running some master classes each quarter where you can rock up and you can ask me a question. I'll present some information, and maybe we can connect the dots doing it that way. So this is just my view. If you can't go to a school, build your own.
Absolutely. And wow, this is something remarkable. I bet that guy who wrote that little dot in the middle of a flip chart is probably just watching you in his retirement, just regretting everything that he said on that particular day because, had
I,
he.
I, I would like to think he's celebrating because actually he stoked the fire, as it were. That was sort of public recognition that I knew I was different. In fact, actually, another boss said to me, if you want to be better, be different, and if you want to be different, be better. But in a way, be better and different, and then you have something to sell.
And that you have shown us today, especially on the Online Prosperity Show. Now, David, I can't thank you enough for, first of all, the journey that you took and just, taking a chance on yourself and being brave and having done something, having done anything and not having just let it on the wayside. And I think you've just left us with these words. What would David do?
Well, what David would do, he's doing it. So thank you very much, Prosper. It's been my pleasure and my privilege. And I look forward to meeting you in person maybe one day if I make it to the real Australia.
You make it to the real Australia. Fantastic. And there you have it, folks. What an inspiring conversation with David John Wallis there, the breakthrough coach for real. And I think he's shown us the true meaning of growth, resilience, and that true growth happens outside of your own comfort zone, and that resilience and belief are the key to creating the lives that we want. And I think David's story just reminds us that success is actually a journey, not a destination. And sometimes the best opportunities come from the most unexpected changes. When David thought he was being, vilified, they were actually igniting the fire inside of him. It's akin to a seed. When a seed is being put in the ground, to a seed, it feels like it's being buried. But that's how a seed is planted. So I can't wait to see, what the next phases or the next stages of David's, school, the Capella Academy would look like. And for those that are watching this conversation, please don't keep it to yourself. Share it with somebody who could actually benefit from David's story, or somebody who's looking to make a major breakthrough in their life, their career, or whatever relationship that might be undergoing. And while you're at it, be sure to subscribe for more episodes that will guide you towards your own breakthroughs. Until next time, keep pushing forward. And in the words of David's dad, Mr. Wallis himself, do something to anything, just don't do nothing at all. Bye for now.